welcome to my very first YouTube video. I'm super excited for this. It's something that I've been thinking of doing. I've kind of toyed around with the idea of starting a YouTube channel for the past year, but I didn't really think that I had anything super interesting to say. But this week was the 1 year anniversary of my breast cancer diagnosis, and it brought up a lot of like complicated feelings and memories, and I just kind of started thinking about where I was 1 year ago when I heard those words, "you have cancer," and I just remembered how like I really desperately craved finding someone who was like me. And I scoured the internet, blogs, Instagram, YouTube, like you name it. I looked for someone who was like me, who was young and going through the same thing, because I wanted to know that I wasn't alone, and I wanted to know that like I was gonna be okay. And I just kind of wanted to see someone else who had gone through it and had come out on the other side. And so, you know, that really inspired me to start my own Instagram and blog, which is sometimes hard. And so the thought of YouTube, I feel like it's so raw and so sometimes like emotional, because you can see me and I don't have like a filter. I don't have the time to think of the right words to say. But again, you know, I just kind of think of me a year ago and still me today, you know, a year later, after gone through all that I've gone through, and how much I really wish that I had someone to look to and hear from. So, you know, I'm really excited to start this channel, and I thought that maybe a good place to start for my first video would be just to kind of talk about my story and how I was diagnosed and kind of all that I've been through the past year. So like I said, it was a year ago that I was diagnosed, so February 2018. And kind of how it all started was I was putting on a sticky boob one night, and it was pretty soon after the New Year. So that's relevant because on New Year's Eve, I put on a sticky boob too, and I didn't feel anything. So if you've never used a sticky boob, it's just like, you know, a little circle, flat, sticky, and you just kind of and smooth it on. So as I was putting it on here, you could feel like right here, really, really pronounced, I felt a lump, and that was not normal. And I knew that wasn't normal for my body. So I honestly didn't think about it that night, because truly I was going out with my friends, keeping it real. I was already been drinking. By the time I was getting dressed, we'd already had a couple drinks. So I was just focused on having fun and going out and living my life. So didn't really think of it, and went out. Then the next morning we were in my friend's kitchen and like making pancakes, whatever, having a good time. And I remembered the lump, thankfully. So I went to feel again, and I felt it again, like super clear. Kind of just like rubbing your skin like that. You could feel it, like I wasn't pressing or anything like that. So it's pretty crazy. And my friend's a nurse, so I asked her like what she thought of it, and she was like, well, I know you're a hypochondriac. I don't think it's anything, like you have nothing to worry about, but since you're crazy, go to the doctor. And I agreed with her. So I actually had just moved back to Florida after living in New York City, so I didn't have any doctors yet, and so I just kind of like went to a doctor like near my parents' house where I was living before I moved into my apartment, and told her what was up, that I had felt this lump, and I was really like dismissed by her. And she was like, you're 24, you have no family history, you have no personal medical history, like I promise you it's nothing. And I didn't really like that answer, because it was not an answer. So I asked her like if there was any testing that I could get done, and basically like forced her to write me a script to go get an appointment for an ultrasound and a mammogram. So a couple days later, I went to get that appointment, and they explained to me that they don't like to mammogram young breast tissue because you can't really see anything. And this was something that I didn't know, that when you're young, you have really dense breast tissue, and that's why, you know, you don't get mammograms until you're like in your, I think 40 is the age that they recommend, unless you have some sort of history. So I didn't know that. I thought it was just because like, oh, that's when you're a little bit older and that's when you need to start like paying attention to your health. I didn't know that it was because of dense tissue. So they explained to me that what they would first do was an ultrasound, and they all were really confident that there would be nothing wrong with me either. Like, I was super healthy, 24, no family history. And so they were like, you know, we're just gonna do the ultrasound and then you'll be on your way. Like, we're not even gonna mammogram. There's no need to do that. And so they did an ultrasound, and then the tech like went away. And I guess went and talked to the doctor, whoever like reads it, and it took a long time. So she was really quiet when she was doing it too. At first she was chatty, and then she like kind of got quiet. And I remember it took like a long time. Like, she kept like looking and looking again. And she was like, okay, I'll be right back. And so, I mean, again, I didn't really think anything of it. And she came back in and she was like, okay, so we're gonna go ahead and do the mammogram. And again, I was like, okay. And so I went, and the nurse who did the mammogram said, yeah, you know, there's like a little shadow, so I think we're gonna do a biopsy. And something super, super crazy that I learned after getting the mammogram, like I said, you know, they don't do it on young people because your breast tissue is so dense, but if the standard of care is a little bit different, and, you know, they did just do a mammogram and not an ultrasound, they would not have seen my tumor at all. So that's really crazy. So I'm glad that, you know, I did the ultrasound because you could see it, and they really couldn't see it until I got an MRI. But that was like after I was diagnosed. So I still wasn't thinking anything of it. Like, I was in the best shape of my life, and who would think that, you know, you could have breast cancer when you're 24? Like, definitely not me. So I scheduled a biopsy, went and had it, and that was like the worst pain in my life. I actually have a picture on my blog, which I will put like a link in the description to this video, so you can like go check it out and kind of read a little bit more about my story and stuff. But my whole breast was like black and blue for weeks, and that was pretty wild. So at this point, it had only been a couple weeks that had passed since my original appointment, and yeah, I got the biopsy, and then it only took a couple days for me to get that call. And by this time I was moving into my apartment, and so the doctor that I no longer go to, who didn't want me to go get checked out in the first place, called me, and she was like, okay, hey, like, what's up? And I told her, oh, you know, I'm in the car, like, driving to Miami. And she was like, oh, okay, cool. So you know, I thought, oh, there's nothing wrong, because she's calling me, and I told her I'm driving 80 miles an hour down the interstate, so there's not gonna be anything wrong. And she's like, okay, so, you know, we got the results, and, you know, it's cancer. And I was like, what? Like, what? And she was like, yeah, you know, it's cancer. So, I remember being like, okay, so like, what's next? Like, I'm someone that, I understand it takes a little bit of time to like make a plan and get answers, but I want to know everything right then, right now. Like, tell me what's up. And she was like, yeah, that's like all I can tell you. Like, we don't really know. And also, this was a Thursday night, and she doesn't work Fridays. So she was like, yeah, you're not gonna hear from me until Monday. And I was like, okay. So I'm driving 80 miles an hour down the interstate. It took me a little bit to like let it sink in. And then I called my mom. I still wasn't like crying or anything. So I called my mom and just like immediately burst into tears. And she was like, you need to turn around and come home, or just like pull over, we'll come meet you. And I was like, no, I'm moving, I'm gonna move. And I remember the drive is like a little less than 4 hours. So I remember on that drive, I just like called, you know, my mom, my dad, my now fiance, and like my best friend. And I don't know, it's so weird. Just like remembering everyone's different reactions. Like, one of my friends just like burst into tears, sobbing. Like, one of my friends she literally was like, fuck cancer, like, we're gonna kill this thing, like, you're the baddest bitch I know. Yeah, no, I don't know. It was really weird. So I moved into my apartment that weekend and waited for the doctor to call me back on Monday. Waited. She didn't call me back. So I called them and I didn't hear from her until like, I think it was like Tuesday. She finally called me back. And, you know, at that point I was over her and over that group of physicians, and I knew I wanted to get a second opinion as well. So thankfully my stepdad is a doctor, and he asked around to like all his friends, and I think, you know, he asked like 10 people, and of those 10 people, 8 of them gave him the same name for a breast surgeon, and her name is Dr. Lisa Minton, and she's amazing. So if you're watching this and you're in the Orlando area and you know, you're maybe going through the same thing as me, I really highly recommend her. She's amazing. So we got kind of my records, or whatever you call them, and I called her office, and I've been super happy ever since. They were amazing. I was able to get an appointment really quickly, and then from there everything just moved really fast. So I was diagnosed on February 8th, and I had my first chemo on, I think it was March 13th. So in the span of a month, I was able to not only get into all these doctors, it's kind of hard, sometimes hard to get appointments, but I was able to get appointments with the breast surgeon, plastic surgeon, oncologist, and radiation oncologist. And I also was able to like get my care plan. And in this month that had passed, I still had the other office, even though I told them I'm not seeing you anymore, I still had them like calling me being like, oh, do you want to talk about like your care plan? And I was like, no, I'm not seeing you anymore. And also, if someone has cancer, wouldn't you be like, hello, come in? So moral of that story is to like always go with your gut and to always like speak your mind. You know, doctors, you 100% should respect them. And like, you know, I think all doctors are generally good and smart, but like they work for you. You're the patient. So if you don't feel comfortable with someone, like, hello, go, bye. There's a million other doctors you can go see. So that is kind of like my first takeaway about this whole cancer story. So yeah, like I said, in all these original appointments that I had with my care team, we found out all these things about breast cancer that I never knew. I thought like it was just cancer and then stage like 1, 2, 3, 4. Like I didn't really know anything. And so I found out, first of all, that there's these things called hormone receptors, and that kind of is one of the things that goes into like typing what breast cancer you have. So you have like 3 hormone receptors. It's HER2, ER, and PR. And so you can be triple positive, which is what my breast cancer was, meaning that all 3 of those hormone receptors are like fueling the growth of the breast cancer cells, if you will. You could be triple negative, which means like none of them are. Or you could be a combination, like ER, PR positive and HER2 negative, you know, like you can be a combination of all those things. So I had triple positive breast cancer, which meant that it was like a pretty clear-cut plan for what my treatment would be. And it consisted of chemo, 6 rounds of chemo, followed by a total of 1 year of like hormone therapy. And then I decided to have a double mastectomy and reconstruction. So all this, like I said, everything happened for me like super quickly. All my major surgeries and major treatments were like encapsulated within the year 2018, which is kind of crazy. Like it was the craziest year of my life. But I started chemo, and the plan was for 6 rounds, but I got super sick after the 5th round. I was like hospitalized, and it was really nasty, and my white blood cells were super low, so I was having a lot of like internal issues and just like felt like crap. So I was hospitalized for a couple days, and when my oncologist, like he actually met me at the ER, we texted him and we were like, hey, we think this isn't normal. So another shout out to my oncologist, Dr. Martin Dietrich. He's also in the Orlando area, so he's freaking amazing too. I love him. We like text him and stuff, and that was something that was super important to me. I think when you're going to find doctors, you know, you want to find someone that you're comfortable with, that you trust, but like someone, I think an important question is like, their communication. So are you gonna answer my emails? Like, are you gonna answer my phone calls, my texts? Like, how can we communicate? And so he literally, like, we can text him 24/7. So it was a Sunday that I started being really sick. And when you start like chemo, they give you this huge binder thing, and it has like all this like paper, and they say put it on your fridge, and if you experience any of these things, like, you have to go to the ER. So I experienced one of those things, and we texted him and we were like, hey, like, should we go? And he was like, yes, I'm calling ahead and I will meet you there. So when he saw me at the ER, he was like, that's it, like, round 5 is it, we're not doing anymore. So yeah, I did 5 rounds of chemo, and when I talk about chemo, I got 4 different drugs. If I can like remember all of them now. It was like, I don't know. I'll actually list them in my description, but they're also on my blog. So if you want to learn more about like the kind of treatment regimen, chemo regimen that I got, you can go there. But it was 2 of the like hardcore chemo drugs that you think of, like being really sick and losing your hair and those kind of tough drugs. And then alongside Herceptin and Perjeta, which are 2 drugs that you get for like the hormone therapy. So Herceptin and Perjeta, I have 2 more rounds of that, so I'll end in March. So it's a full calendar year that you're on that, and I think it ends up being like 12 or 13 rounds of that. But that was super easy. I don't have any like side effects. I get a little tired, but that's it. So after I finished chemo, we fast-tracked my surgery, and I decided pretty early on that I was going to get a double mastectomy. At the end of the day, you have options. Like, your doctor can't force you into doing something, and my doctors, at least, like, they don't like to tell you what to do. It's a super personal decision, and like, that's your own choice. So, you know, I could have done a lumpectomy, a single mastectomy, which would be just 1 breast, or a double. And, you know, I kind of was looking at this as, you know, this is a pretty aggressive form of breast cancer. I'm 24, like, I'm already totally shook that I'm going through this. So I don't want this to happen again. And I looked at it like a double mastectomy gives me like the greatest chance of not having to do this again. So I was like, take them. I want some new ones anyway. Like, they're gonna look great. So we did a double mastectomy, and you know, I'll make another video talking about that, because I think that was something that I would have loved to see when I was preparing for surgery. But it wasn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be. I took off like 2.5 weeks of work, and yeah, I mean, I did that surgery at the end of July. And then from August to November, I did I had to have a delayed reconstruction. So at the time of my mastectomy, my surgeon went in, and then my plastic surgeon, Dr. Edgar Sosa, also in Orlando and also incredible, came in right after her and put these things called expanders in. And so basically they just like stretch out your breasts so that it's easy for them to swap out the expander for a permanent implant when it comes time for that. So over the course of August to November, I went in every 3 weeks and had them filled up a little bit. And then right before Christmas, I got my new boobs. And that's kind of where I am now. That's kind of my cancer story. You know, I was super lucky that when I had my mastectomy, they found no lymph node involvement, which meant that I didn't have to undergo like any more treatments in terms of like radiation or chemo or anything like that. So I was very thankful for that. I do have a drug that I take daily for the next 5 years. I guess maybe it's like 4.5 now. The countdown is on. But that's called letrozole. And if you've heard of like tamoxifen, it's kind of the same thing. Basically, again, something that will reduce the risk of recurrence for me. So I'll be on that for 5 years. I also get Lupron injections, and I talk about that on my blog when I'm talking about fertility. So you can check that post out too. I know, you know, fertility was a huge question for me because I've always wanted to be a mom, and you know, I've always wanted to be able to give birth to my own children too. So I wanted to make sure that I had the chance to do that if that's in my future. So I started Lupron injections before chemo. And basically, like, if you imagine your ovaries as having like little doors on them, it like closes the doors and locks them. So like all your eggs are safe and they're not getting like chemofied. So it's like this huge needle you get in your butt, and I cannot look at the needle or I will pass out, but it really doesn't hurt like that bad. So I used to get it every month. Now I get it every 3 months because my oncologist is like, get the hell out of this office and live your life. So I'll be on that and the letrozole pill, which is every day for the next 4.5 years, for a total of 5 years, and just kind of like monitoring things for the next rest of my life. But I don't know, yeah, that's kind of like my cancer story. I thought that it would be a good way to kick off this channel, and I'm super excited to start this new platform and kind of just like expand Whitty's Titty Committee. When I started my blog, it was because I didn't know anyone else like me, and I felt super, super alone. But since starting and having this platform, I've met so many people who are like me, and so many people have reached out and like told me, you know, that I'm helping them and that they're thankful for me. But honestly, like, I'm thankful for everyone else. I'm so thankful for the friends I made. I'm so thankful for like everyone who reaches out to me and like sends me their well wishes or tells me that I'm helping them. Like, that is crazy to me, and it helps me so much. So nothing is really off limits for me. Like, I'm happy to talk about anything because the love and support that I've gotten from being open and out there and doing this kind of stuff, like, I am forever indebted to this community. So I'm happy to like give back in whatever way I can. And I have a couple ideas in mind. I think like maybe something about hair, or, you know, like I said, talking about my surgery and like how I prepped for that. But I would love to hear y'all's ideas, and if there's something that you really want to hear about, or something that like no one's talking about and you have questions, please let me know. I know like every time I go to the infusion center, or every time I like look up stuff on the internet, or I'm like given literature, it's all, no offense to, you know, older people, but it's all older people, kind of like geared toward them. And I didn't really think that was super helpful for me, because like something that someone who's like 60 years old going through breast cancer, it's like a little bit different and a different set of challenges. Like at 60, you know, you've already had kids. You're not thinking about Lupron injections and like how to save your fertility and like what you have to do. Like, should you harvest eggs? Should you not? So, moral of the story, not to be too like rambling, but yeah, I'm just happy to help, and I'm really excited to start this platform. And please let me know if you have any questions. Let me know what you want to see from me. I'm super happy to help. You can always follow me on Instagram. My handle is @AlexWhitaker, and I'll put that in the description below. You could also look up the hashtag Whitty's Titty Committee, or check out my blog for all those links. It's whittystittycommittee.com. Okay, see you next time.